Hello, welcome to episode 25 of Harmonious World. This time I'm joined by American pianist Jeni Slotchiver, who has a fabulous new album out right now, which is called American Heritage. And it's got some fantastic pieces, and it's hard to categorise. There's some folk, there's some classical, there's some jazz, there's some blues, there's all sorts of things going on in there. It's a great album. Do get a chance to listen to it if you can. I'll put the link in the show notes. And meanwhile, I hope you enjoy our chat. Hello.
Hello, Hilary.
Hi, Jeni. Lovely to meet you.
Nice to meet you and be included in your fabulous podcast. We've really enjoyed them. We have. Nice.
I've had some amazing people. It's been incredible.
Honestly, really.
Yeah, it's. I'm very fortunate, and I think it's one of the few benefits of lockdown has been that people have been available.
Right.
So yeah, it's been amazing. So
it's amazing that we can connect this way too, so far from each other.
Yes, it's amazing, isn't it? So where are you?
I'm about half a block north of Carnegie Hall in Midtown Manhattan, and a block south of Central Park.
Oh, wow.
I know. And we're expecting a foot of snow tonight.
Oh, really?
You are in?
I'm in Hertfordshire, so just about 30 miles north of London.
Lovely.
It's really nice. It's really lovely. And yeah, I'm very lucky. And I've been to New York a few times, and I just love walking the streets and just experiencing so much of the multicultural diversity.
And the energy. Actually, that's one of our favorite things to do is walk the city, walk the boroughs, 6-7 miles. We love to do that. And the different streets, the architecture, and yes, the beautiful people, the smells of all the different exotic things cooking on the street. It's really a wonderful city to live in.
Yes, absolutely. So tell me about your album, American Heritage.
Well, the album is American music, obviously. It came together in a rather organic way. I've always had, I've had a great relationship with new and rarely heard works. Always tried to include these things on my programs, along with, the standard repertoire is usually when you're younger, what you're expected to perform. But I always, even as a young child, I always looked to find new and unusual things to introduce to audiences, something that might be provocative and just, appealing. So I often found pieces that were American in flavor, and like the spirituals of Sam Coolidge Taylor, I played many of them, and I thought it was important to bring that music to light. Besides them being beautiful piano settings, they're also very important historically. And Gottschalk I also played when I was younger. It wasn't so popular then, and it was novel. And for compositions from 1844, the rhythms were daring, the harmonies were very contemporary, and the writing was challenging. And I found him to be such a visionary in terms of doing something that it was already half a century later when Dvorak incorporated plain song into his music. Gottschalk really was setting a path that other composers rejected until that time. So I recognized that, and I from that grew discovery of the other composers. And it was really strictly going to be an American album at first, just a very American album. And I have so much of that repertoire. It was hard to choose, but it was organic. Things were coming together as a program. And then searching about the origins of Shenandoah, I started reading historical journals and articles about the songs of the great African rivers that were preserved on the paddle boats, clipper ships of this country by the all-Black crews. And I was fascinated to learn that Shenandoah was indeed a shanty song originally named Shenandoah. And Mobile River was originally what Swanee River was. And so it seemed that almost the program was coming together as all music that came from to our shores, or these composers were inspired, that is, by melodies, rhythms, harmonies, and other stylistic elements that first arrived on our shores with the first enslaved peoples. And so that's exactly what's on the album, is this inspiration and how these composers draw from it. And so it's such a variety of different pieces on here. But I wanted to tell a story, and I hope I've done that.
For sure. I mean, it's a beautiful album, and it's hard to categorize. I love music that you can't categorize.
Exactly.
So
I didn't want to do anything. I didn't want to pigeonhole. This is all women. This is all African American women. This is all. I just wanted it to be. And then there's history here. Like, just Harry Burleigh he's like a walking history movie. I mean, his life touched on so many important events, from the desegregation of churches here in the city that he was instrumental in, and the years he spent with Dvorak singing to him between 1892 and those 4 years, and how he influenced Dvorak, being his copyist and his assistant. And just, I don't know, it's an album that for me has been steeped in history, and it's expansive in that regard.
Yeah, and completely cross. I mean, it doesn't even have cultural. I mean, culture is just isn't there, because it's everywhere, because that's all it is so many different cultures coming together.
Yes, and then you see here that when also opening with Deep River, the demonstration that when the African American musicians retrieved their heritage, the spiritual, from the commercialization and parodies of the minstrel shows and vaudeville, they gained a truly important artistic essence. And from that, the expression of those spirituals gave rise to a new generation of African-American artists, and eventually was synonymous with the message of freedom in the civil rights movement. But it was a genre that was going to be uniquely theirs, and it was going to come to be one of the greatest, if not the greatest, contributions, strictly, intrinsically American contributions to 20th century art music. So starting with that, and then branching out into, all of the other aspects of this, the first African-American woman that was considered a symphonist, and then Florence Price and her student Margaret Bond. So they're all tied in some ways together. Did you have a favorite?
I think the whole Swanee River, Mobile River thing, I loved that.
I do too.
Yeah.
The Swanee River, it's, for all I didn't realize that Swanee River, and that arrangement of William Grant Still is so poignant. We ended the album with that as a way of saying, good night, goodbye. But the harmonization, it seems so simple, but it's so, it gives just the barest glimpse into how great this composer really is. Yeah. And I was hoping actually, by including those short works, I wanted to show a variety of different styles on the album that would appeal to people who maybe weren't so involved with classical music, involved with popular. They liked it, but then they would get the relationship, the blues, there's jazz, there's gospel here. And with the folk songs, where did they come from? Well, this is where they came from. We think of them as being so American, but they came from other shores to us.
Yeah.
Fascinating. And then I was hoping that people would listen to that and go, wow, that's compelling. And then look into the larger works of some of these composers, their symphonies, the ballets, the operas. And that was really my hope, is to have people do a deeper dive into the composers' lives and works.
Yes, it's opened my eyes to some of the American composers. I mean, I'm very familiar with sort of Gershwin and Copland, but beyond that, I get a little bit shaky. And this reminded me, I mean, the music is very different, but of Ralph Vaughan Williams and his collections of English folk music, and how he went out and searched for songs and tunes and rhythms and all of these bits of music that were everyday existence to people.
Exactly. I agree. And they're not, Gottschalk is well known now. Frederick Rzewski is an avant-garde, very well known. But many people don't know this repertory. And certainly, I think Florence Price, of course, is coming into her own. There was a big discovery, a treasure trove of her manuscripts found in a derelict house outside of Chicago that was being renovated. There in the attic were boxes of her discovery of her two very important violin concertos and her fourth symphony. And we have to remember that, well, she was her own advocate. So she was, repping herself the whole time. She was incredibly prolific. And so there were a lot of scores that are unpublished. And the same with Margaret Bonds, I'm sure. So now she's come more to light, and musicologists are writing about her. They're saying that and her works can be highly chromatic. The little dances I think are so evocative and magical, but she has some very chromatic works and large works. And musicologists have said that evaluating the American modernism of the 30s and 40s is completely incomplete without consideration of her works. It's that large a body of work. So yeah, there's a lot to be considered here. The theater works, the collaborations of the different artists together with the Harlem Renaissance, the Chicago Renaissance, it's mind-boggling how much went on between these artists and the amount of beauty that came out of it. And it did, while launching the spiritual to the stage, by elevating it in that way, it demanded that formal trained singers had to sing it. And it elevated, it regained its dignity and really became a tradition for recitalists for decades to end their programs with a collection of spirituals. So it's quite interesting. And the dances, of course, the African Americans' rhythms that grew out of their dances through transformation and assimilation informed all of the American modern dance traditions, popular dance traditions, ragtime, even up to hip hop, the Charleston, you name it. And the Juba dance that's on there is a direct precursor to the jitterbug. It's very interesting to see how this is all, it's all woven together.
Yes, and I mean, you can't really talk about any of this music without talking about race and, the implications of people who are inherently racist, nevertheless, love to listen to music that wouldn't be what it was without
exactly
people of color. It's incredible.
Thank you. Exactly. It permeates our culture entirely, and yet there are people who I don't even know if they could take that in. I really don't. But it's really true. And the other thing is, yes, many people are familiar with Gershwin. He was successful in integrating this music. Many composers were not, because classical music in its structured form, you can't really put folk music into it and have it come off as anything but derivative and stilted. These composers, basically, let's say, a foundation of European Romanticism, and then they layered their cultural elements, their African-American heritage on top of that. We know that Margaret Bonds did that and used the bluesy harmonies and, some chromaticism of jazz. But it's true that people, when I first started to conceive of this album, put it together, I was aware that Copland, Gershwin, that I was going to do an album of great American music, but it wasn't going to be the great American music of the white classical canon of composers,
right?
That these women were even competing with, mostly dead white classical canon. So this is an entirely different group, especially for the women who consider themselves to have two disabilities, being of color, as Price said, and being a woman. Margaret Bonds, on the other hand, looked at the race as being the lesser one, but being the woman as being much more of discriminatory.
Yeah,
working in her field.
Absolutely. Can you tell me a little bit? Obviously, I've read your bio and everything, but tell me a little bit about your background and how you are here now.
Well, I recorded, in terms of my career, the 3 CDs before this are all Busoni the Visionary, volume 1, 2, and 3. I have a strong relationship with that composer. I've been an exponent of his work, a lecturer, quasi-authority. I've written many essays on his work and his journey. And then that, in a way, ties into this in this way that most people understand, some people might not, that I was always fascinated as a child with how composers used known melodies, existing melodies, how they incorporated them, because I felt like that gave me a window into their compositional style. A melody I knew, maybe like the Greensleeves in the Fourth Elegy of Busoni. And then what he does with that, or the Carmen, the Sonatina Super Carmen, how he turns it into very dark, phantasmagorical world, these themes we knew and from Bizet in a different light. So here again, we have music that I knew those spirituals. I knew a lot of them. I did spend my early years in the South, and both of my parents were musicians, highly trained amateurs, I would say, but very exquisite musicians. So I was always surrounded by music, and I did hear this music. I heard gospel. I loved gospel. I loved jazz. I was exposed to a lot. So this music did fascinate me too, because it sounds familiar. Even the Burley, there's some strains, and he quotes some spirituals, but much of it, it's his own music, and yet it sounds so familiar, doesn't it?
Yeah.
That work is incredible to me, and that just astounded me. For years, I'd hoped to hear that piece, because I was honored to be invited to be a judge at a piano competition for the historical Black colleges and universities in Tennessee State University. And one of the requirements, one piece they would choose of a Black composer. The rest was standard repertory. And there was a list. And of course, I knew the music. And I was so hoping to hear the Burley, but I knew that with slim chances, because it's rather, it's sparse itself, and it belies the real technical and expressive difficulties of that piece. It really requires a lot of subtleties and a natural feeling. You have to use a lot of rubato to musicians. That's a lot of give and take. And so anyway, I learned a lot from listening to the students and their interpretations of other pieces, but I felt there was a void and more people should record this work. Plus I was playing it and I loved it. So I was really happy to finally have an opportunity to do it. And so, yes, I heard this music, but it also was part of my experience. Busoni had said that transcription, that when people criticize transcription, Busoni would say, everything in music is a transcription, because let's consider it's all up there in the music of the spheres, he said, all the thoughts, all the sounds. The composers are inspired, they divine something, so they take that in. And then to get it on paper that's a transcription, first of all, from the spheres to the mind. Then the inspiration takes root and is born, and they have to get that down onto paper. That's another transcription. And then when we look at that, we look at those notes and that roadmap, that's another transcription in itself. And I think when we take in an artist's performance, we're also transcribing it to our own experience. So this music for me was a wealth of that entire philosophy.
Yeah, brilliant. Well, thank you. How has your lockdown been?
Oh my goodness. We're pretty lucky because I've got my instruments here. I can play and I can explore my music. If I want to interact with any of my students or my colleagues, we can do that like you and I are. My husband is a psychoanalyst, and he is able to, work with his people like this, or if they prefer, on phone. Sometimes he goes to his office to do that. Usually he's there, but on like a bad weather day, like tomorrow might be, maybe he'll set up here. So it's been stressful. We've been safe. I say it's been stressful just because of the people that we know are not safe, that don't have the opportunity to, isolate and work at home. So the whole thing has been very stressful for our community at large in the city. But we've been safe, and we are very self-contained here. We've been fine. We worry, of course, we worry about the people we care about and love and the people we don't even know. And this country's just gone absolutely nuts. So it's tragic because it didn't have to be this way, as you know.
No.
What about where you are?
Well, we've gone into, we're moving around, the rules are changing sort of all the time. But the situation we're in at the moment, where I live here, we can still go to shops, we can go to restaurants.
Nice.
They are all very safe. It feels like they're keeping everything clean and socially distanced, and it's really good. The kids are still at school, although there are obviously quite a few of them who have to either isolate because they're ill or because they know somebody who was ill. So there's been a lot of coming and going at schools and things, and obviously in workplaces as well. But they've just announced today that they're going to stick to this idea that over Christmas households can join together.
Yeah.
Which actually I had been really thinking through, because I live alone and my children are in their 20s, and I was hoping that both of them would be able to come back for Christmas, and in fact they now can.
Of course.
Which is, I mean, I would have stuck to the rules because that's the sort of person I am, but I would have been devastated if I hadn't been able to see them.
Yes, I mean, some people isolate for, whatever they think is safe, and then they get together. Here, every state is doing a different thing. And so it's not the type of situation we wanted to travel in. We had been out and about when things were eased up in New York, dining outside, 25% inside. We have a tremendous amount of friends in hospitality. We have friends who are chefs, marvelous chefs, and, sommeliers. And so we visited with them. We felt very safe while we were doing that, but we were cautious. Yeah. And I think, because New York on Thanksgiving, there were tons of tourists here. I couldn't believe it. Where were they coming from? Well, we had low numbers in the fall, and the city was packed with tourists, families from everywhere, Europe, right? In Thanksgiving weekend, we heard almost every language you could possibly think of. I mean, 57th Street and Fifth Avenue, that's like the crossroads, but we heard German, we heard Dutch, and we live right in the center of that. Right now, it's very quiet because a lot of New Yorkers have left. There are other snowbirds and they've gone to the south, it's been, my mother turned 90.
Oh.
In November. Wow. And we couldn't go. I just felt it wasn't fair of me to ask her, look, Mom, you have to stay home because she's active. She likes to go to swim. She plays masked mahjong with her lady group, and she reads, she does her yoga, like Zooming, but I didn't want to, and I know she's safe, but I would have had to ask her, look, you and my sister and her boyfriend have to, stay at home for a week before we drive down. It's 14 hours from here because they're in Nashville. But we're in touch all the time. So it's lovely. And I'm just so happy that she's, healthy and active through this whole crazy thing.
I know. Well, I'm so lucky. My parents live across the road from me.
Wow.
They are, my dad is 88, my mum is 85.
Wow.
And I can see them every day. I go and I do bits of shopping for them, or, I take things in or whatever, but I stay as far away as I possibly can. But it's so lovely. That's the best thing about this year is them living across the road. They're in their own little self-contained apartment, but it's there's staff there who will help if there's any problem or anything. So wonderful. I know.
My sister, one of my sisters, I have two, lives just across the street from my mother. So she's there all the time. And they're careful with their distance. And then my sister has a lovely boyfriend too. So Mom is not alone, and like I said, she has her friends that she plays cards with. And I just think we've all had to make our own way. Since my work is so self-contained, it doesn't feel too unusual for me to just be home working at the instrument, writing, doing what I do. But for many people, it's quite a change. But it's wonderful to know that the people that you're closest to are right there.
I know, it really is. Yeah.
And in the city, it's that way too, because our concierges and the people that work in the building, it's pretty much emptied out. We have a small building, but a lot of the people have other homes. So it's kind of nice. I don't know how many people in residence here, not many. And it's a beautiful building. But the people that are working the building, the porters and the concierges, really have been marvelous. When the city shut down, not even any delivery people could come into the building. They'd have to, go into the basement, I guess, and things would be in the elevator, would be sent up to us by the concierges. So yeah, there's been a lot of extra effort going around. And several of my friends have played concerts, of course, on special platforms. And we forgot to say happy birthday, Beethoven.
Yes.
Here, 250 years old.
I know, absolutely. Yeah. Well, at the beginning of 2020, I decided that I was going to go to Vienna. I've never been to Vienna.
Oh, wow.
And I decided I was going to Vienna at Easter. So I had my trip to Vienna booked for early April. And as it was looking increasingly unlikely that I was going to be able to go, I was actually more upset about that than anything else, because I'd got the whole thing planned about this homage to Beethoven in advance of his birthday.
Right. Yeah. And it's such a beautiful city, the opera, the last time I was there, it was just as beautiful as it ever was. I had been there when I was much younger, and I walked around and I could point to everything. I remember staying up. Oh, there was a music shop over here. I took my husband, and it was the first time he'd been, and I couldn't believe how much I remembered. Oh, I stayed here with my friend. We were at the Hochschule für Musik, and this concert. And it's a wonderful city to walk in, just like you mentioned to New York. So you'll go as soon as,
Oh, yeah.
Shots, right?
Well, and in fact, on social media, I've connected with a couple of people in Vienna. And now, of course, because I've been talking to them online for so much longer, I feel like I've got people that will actually show me around and help me explore. It's amazing.
It's a wonderful thing about social media, how you make these connections, and some of them really just take off, have a life of their own, and they're truly helpful and enriching.
Yes, exactly. Absolutely. And I have to say, probably the best thing for me about doing this podcast has been to meet people, albeit through a screen. But I genuinely think that there are people that, many of them will either come to the UK for concerts, or I'll travel, to hear. If I come to America, I've got a lot of people that I want to hear play.
You really do, but you have a lot of, right? Yeah. But from all over the world. But you'll be visiting your friends. You'll be giving us a ring and telling us when you'll be there.
Exactly.
Down in different places of your book, lunch here, dinner here.
Yeah. So do you have any tentative plans yet for touring?
I feel like I have to really wait to see when I can.
Yeah.
We might do a virtual concert in the spring. I might, and that's something I would definitely consider. I wanted to, because of the launch of the album.
Of course.
I wanted to publicize it that way, but it's just not a time when anybody's, going into halls and playing concerts. So it either have to be online. There are some halls people are thinking of doing with 25 people in the audience, socially distanced, in the spring, where the beautiful, historic hall in the village, windows open onto the street. But even that, I think and then you broadcast the rest of it. It's hard to adjust to doing things like that, though, if that's the only way. I don't know when we will get the vaccination, and I don't know when the world will settle down. So clearly the musicians are going to have to just get out and do virtual concerts.
Yeah.
I think more and more they will. A friend of mine and a colleague is doing one Friday night, and it's part of a Beethoven festival she formulated all on, online, on virtual. So yeah, I had to forego the work I'd planned, but I have a feeling that this little album has legs. It'll keep running along. I've gotten some really positive responses from it, particularly radio. It's being played all over the radio here in this country. I have some interviews set up in this interview. So it's encouraging. First of all, we all need feedback on our work, right?
Yeah.
And so it's difficult not playing the concerts because I'm not getting that direct feedback. But when people listen to the record, they have contacted me. And then when I see the response on the radio. So I think that I'm hoping that, but who knows, by that time there may be maybe there's another recording coming out. And I've heard too, my friends that are producers and engineers, they're very busy right now. So one thing musicians are doing is they're recording. They're going into the big halls where I made my recording, and they're working. So
yes,
that's a good thing.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you so much, Jeni. I really appreciate your time.
I so enjoyed your company and talking to you about these different things current, and it's been a wonderful experience. And I'm also very honored that you included me in your lovely series.
Well, I love the album. I really, and I think it's one I'm going to keep coming back to because there's so much in there.
There is. There's 18 tracks and they're all so different, I think.
Yeah, very much so.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Jeni. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Well, obviously that interview took place a few days before here in Hertfordshire in the UK. We were put into a further lockdown, which means that Christmas is effectively cancelled with family. Nevertheless, it was lovely to talk to Jeni, and very interesting actually to discover her work on Busoni, another huge composer, and she's obviously an authority on him. And it was lovely also to talk about Beethoven's 250th anniversary, which was on the day that we spoke, which was lovely. So I hope you enjoyed our chat. I hope you're enjoying listening to all of the episodes of Harmonious World, and I've got some exciting new people coming up, so it's not going to stop for Christmas. You might notice that I have now got a button that says you can buy me a cup of tea. So unfortunately you can't buy me a cup of tea in real life, but for now you could make a small donation if you'd like to. Please don't feel any obligation, and it would be lovely if you could share this or subscribe to the podcast, and I look forward to sharing some more stories with you in the coming weeks. Thank you for listening to the latest episode of Harmonious World. My name is Hilary Seabrook, and it's a great delight to bring this series of discussions with musicians and composers and writers and all sorts of people to you. Obviously, there's no point in having a podcast if people aren't listening, and I'm very grateful to my listeners for doing so. Thanks also to Joe English for composing and performing this new theme tune. So wherever you get your podcast, you can leave a review. You can share this with your friends and family, either as a link or on social media and that sort of thing. I'd be really grateful for that. Don't forget that you can subscribe now. There's a link wherever you get your podcasts. So have a great week, and please remember why I started this, which is just to try and make the world a little more harmonious. Thanks for listening to Harmonious World.